Art has its own power in the world, and is as much a force in the power play of global politics today as it once was in the arena of Cold War politics. So what do people mean when they say that a piece of art is being political? Depends on who you're asking, right? Reactionaries like to label art as political in a pejorative manner. I'm sure you're familiar with right-wing outrage merchants decrying various mainstream works as too political, or woke, or virtue signaling. But these culture war provocateurs can no sooner strip politics from art than strip skin off of their very own spines. Because art is political. That's the reality. Some art is explicit, some implicit. Some art's politics are derived from audience interpretation, creator's intention, cultural context, or even a cocktail of all of the above. Now, I believe art is a weapon, if wielded correctly. An armor-piercing projectile that can cut through the noise of the zeitgeist and deliver a surgical read on the political struggles of the moment. And my go-to example for this kind of work is Mobile Suit Gundam.
Universal Century 0068. Chaos reigns as the zombie regime exerts its control. But the one-year war is still years away.
What in the world is that thing?
Mobile suits are merely in development. But so is the scorned future leader of a new movement.
He has a keen mind. He's a special boy with many unique qualities.
Tensions rise.
Your father was assassinated by those zombie fiends.
Allegiances are drawn.
Join me. Stand with me on the battlefield.
And sides are chosen.
The enemy. And I'm gonna take them out.
Gundam is a behemoth of a franchise. It's captivated audiences around the globe for over 4 decades, and personally, it's my greatest fandom hyperfixation, and a series that's played a huge part in my growth as a filmmaker and also as a leftist activist. It can be overwhelming to know where to start with Gundam, especially now with the new series airing. So as a brief, quick little primer, I'll explain the two continuities. There's the original Universal Century timeline continuity that started in 1979 and has continued with sequels, shows, and movies. And then there's a variety of one-off, standalone, alternate timeline stories. They come with a smaller relative time commitment. They require no prerequisite Gundam viewing for entry. They're just completely on their own. You got works like Gundam Wing, Iron-Blooded Orphans, or the recent Witch from Mercury. And lots of these stories, especially from the Universal Century timeline, have left an indelible impact on audiences and the industry alike. So what exactly is this new Gundam show that just started airing? Gundam GQuuuuuuX takes an interesting deviation. It tells an alternative history of the original Universal Century's one-year war, which is the biggest conflict in that entire timeline. But we'll come back to the new show and its social justice-focused Cold War allegory a little bit later. We still have to talk about the origins of Gundam and its own politics. Now, I've seen the memes, and I know that a lot of anime fans simplify the Gundam franchise's political message to the simple phrase, "War is hell." And yes, that is a core theme of Mobile Suit Gundam. The human cost of war is a constant focus. More than its massive action set pieces and shuddering mecha battles, we experience the sober aftermath, the cityscape and environmental destruction, the grieving families, the psychological scars left on soldiers and civilians alike. Collateral damage is shown not to be a passive side effect of war, but a primary active feature. But beyond its anti-war stance, Gundam is overflowing with leftist critiques of imperialism, class struggle, and capitalism. Watching Gundam shows in my youth, they were really my first exposure to grandiose political drama or diplomatic intrigue. Gundam aggressively argues against political cynicism and in favor of revolutionary possibility and radical acts of liberation. Beneath its surface of traumatic giant robots and gripping characters lies an unapologetically political narrative. One that questions the state of our imperial world, challenges systems like fascism or capitalism, and exposes the struggles of the marginalized. In the original Universal Century timeline, there is no good versus evil binary. We see that war is about power and profit between competing ruling class hierarchies. The original 1979 series, set during the one-year war between the Earth Federation and the Principality of Zeon, marinates in the horrors of war and serves as an analog for the world wars of our past. The opening scene of the entire series shows apocalyptic levels of sci-fi destruction and immediately brings you up to speed that a mere 9 months of this conflict has cost the human race half of its entire population. The Earth Federation, a bloated neoliberal bureaucracy led by Earth's elite, and the Principality of Zeon, a fascist space dictatorship asserting independence from the planet, are both portrayed as flawed systems that perpetuate violence for their own gain. Zeon, despite its revolutionary rhetoric and talk of fighting for colonial independence, is ruled by the eugenicist, aristocratic Zabi family, who manipulate the grievances of the oppressed space colony citizens to fuel their own ambitions. The Earth Federation, the one-world government of the Earth elite and politically privileged, stands as an extension of Western colonial neoliberal hegemony, the final stage of imperialism, with nowhere left to colonize but beyond the heavens, characterized by mindless climate destruction and apathetic oligarchy. The show's protagonist, Amuro Ray, isn't a gung-ho soldier. He's a reluctant pilot, a 15-year-old shut-in nerd turned refugee turned child soldier, thrust into a war he never asked for. His journey reflects the human cost of conflict as he grapples with trauma, loss, and the dehumanizing nature of killing human beings. Through the eyes of Amuro and the rest of his comrades, who are primarily also fellow refugees turned child soldiers, we see the gears of the military-industrial complex crush lives into the meat grinder, as the ruling class profit from endless conflict and the new arms race of giant robots known as mobile suits. The people of the colonies have legitimate grievances and are suffering under the oppressive hand of the Earth Federation's empire. However, the series complicates this narrative by showing how Zeon's leadership becomes just as oppressive as the Federation they seek to overthrow, due to the ruling Zabi family co-opting and bastardizing the Hegelian Marxist-style ideals of the faction's namesake, political philosopher Zeon Daikun, into the eugenics-style supremacist dogma of Zeon's war crime-addicted executive leader, Giran Zabi. Meanwhile, the Earth Federation, positioned as the so-called legitimate government, is riddled with corruption and indifference to the suffering of its people. Their ideology echoes Western European empires and, of course, the United States' decaying hegemonic world order. Neither side in this conflict is truly fighting for justice, just for control. The people of Earth are regularly referred to in the series as the elite, living in luxury on Earth and polluting the planet while exploiting the space colonies for resource and labor. The colonies, on the other hand, are home to the working class and the disenfranchised, the second-class citizens impacted by social stratification. While Zeon's plight does show the real-world risk of people's revolutions getting co-opted by autocratic leaders, Gundam chooses to still aggressively empathize with the common people fighting for liberation, even if they're from Zeon, or rather, especially if they're from Zeon. While the working class of Zeon and other colonies are diverse and varied in their beliefs, the same can't be said for Zeon's nepotistic leadership. Giran Zabi is Zeon's explicitly fascist dictator who uses false revolutionary rhetoric to justify his regime's genocidal atrocities against colony citizens and Earth citizens alike. His speeches echo the original, real-world fascist tyrants of World War II. Even Giran's own father, Degwin Zabi, the sovereign of Zeon, goes out of his way to highlight this.
Just what are you planning? We've reduced the human population. We will then maintain these numbers with the superior races. It's the only way man can finally attain everlasting peace. and it can only be done by controlling people through the Zabi family dictatorship.
Garen, are you familiar with Adolf Hitler?
Hitler? You mean from the Middle Ages?
Yes, a dictator, completely out of touch with the rest of the world. You seem to be following in his footsteps.
Is that so?
I established the Principality as a means to quickly unite the Zeons and to make the Zeon ideal a reality. But now,
Hitler's follower has managed to lead the nation to a dictatorship.
together with Cassilia,
Yes. Just as with the Federation, a democracy will only promote weakness. People will only end up destroying each other. As they have done so in this war, I'll be victorious. See for yourself how a Hitler follower fights this war. I depart to take my command at Abawaku.
don't forget that Adolf Hitler was defeated.
Gundam's anti-fascist messaging does not exclusively target Zeon, however. The Earth Federation's authoritarian tendencies are on full display throughout all of the shows, especially the sequels to the original 1979 anime, which delve into corrupt army officials, militarized anti-immigrant police forces, and colony-wide suppression of dissent. Even the overemphasis on supposed security from terrorism as an excuse to increase autocratic power becomes a central issue. This dual critique reflects a still existing global dynamic in our real world today. Two competing evils claiming they're the less terrible option. Corrupt neoliberal hegemony on one side versus upstart far-right fake populism on the other, leaving the working class and the marginalized communities of the world without powerful socialist or humanist or egalitarian factions to even side with. The Gundam, as a weapon and as a story concept, imagines reorienting power to potential revolutionaries in the cockpit of these mobile suits instead of relying on the tired old rule of these systems and factions. Now that brings us to our latest series, Gundam GQuuuuuuX, which is still airing at the moment. Directed by Kazuyo Tsurumaki, the director of Fooly Cooly, and written by Yoji Inakido, writer for Sailor Moon and Revolutionary Girl Utena, with a special prologue penned by Hideaki Anno, director of Neon Genesis Evangelion, this show has quite the impressive creative energy behind it. GQuuuuuuX isn't just another Universal Century side story like we've seen in the past. It's an alternative history following the One-Year War, but with a twist. Zeon wins the war instead of the Federation. This show takes place 6 years after the original series, not unlike the original sequel to Gundam, Zeta Gundam, which took place 8 years after and featured the victorious Earth Federation becoming an all-out zombie-like totalitarian fascist state of their own. Unlike most other Gundam shows, there isn't a grand conflict or war occurring. There isn't some large military faction for our young heroes to fight for. You see, GQuuuuuuX chooses instead to focus on a kind of post-war life in a neutral space colony, as our characters try to survive the mundane lethality of corporate privatization, income inequality, and a behind-the-scenes tug-of-war for power within the ruling Zeonic government, who, unsurprisingly, did not bring liberation for the Spacenoids, but rather continued hierarchical autocracy. Director Kazuya Tsurumaki calls GQuuuuuuX a historical what-if science fiction. He explicitly invoked the Cold War atmosphere from his own youth, comparing GQuuuuuuX not to military dramas, but to alternative history fiction like Red Sun Black Cross, a story where the Axis powers win World War II. This genre of speculative what-ifs lets Gundam question not just what happened, but why it happened, and what would change if the machinery of empire turned a different gear. While the original One-Year War channeled the feelings of World War II, Tsurumaki wanted GQuuuuuuX to feel like a Cold War, not just a geopolitical kind, but an emotional one. Subtle dread, ideological tension, militarized peace. He explains, Rather than a post-war, I'd say it's a Cold War. When I was a kid, we were right in the midst of the Cold War. The US and the USSR never fought each other directly, but it felt like the next war could break out at any moment. There were novels or movies about the USSR army suddenly landing on our territory and turning Japan into a battlefield, and back then, it didn't feel all that unrealistic. When we decided on UC0085 as the time setting for GQuuuuuuX, a certain member of the staff pointed out that you're doing a Gundam, but you're not writing about a war? All the previous Gundam, up until now, have portrayed a war of some sort, be it a full-scale war between different powers or a factional struggle within the military, almost like a civil war. So I thought that writing about a Cold War would have worked as well. I thought that by depicting the feelings I've experienced under the Cold War, I could convey a unique atmosphere unlike that of any other Gundam before. That fear, he says, is returning in today's generation, one shaped not by the fall of the Berlin Wall, but by the rise of the War on Terror. He noted that the original Gundam creator, Yoshiyuki Tomino, was part of the last generation that truly experienced total war. My generation, of course, didn't experience actual war, but we do understand the feelings of the Cold War. Naturally, conveying those sensations to the current young generation is very difficult, but in today's reality as well, war has broken out in Ukraine, and conflicts and civil wars continue unabated in the Middle East. It's not outside the realm of possibility for the current situation to escalate in a worldwide conflict. I believe that, to some extent, the prospect of a future war between nations has unfortunately become a reality among the young people of today. That's something that hasn't been felt for about 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, isn't it? After 9/11, the United States didn't enter a traditional war. It built a global surveillance state, waged proxy wars, normalized drone warfare, and rebranded permanent occupation as quote-unquote stabilization. Zeon in GQuuuuuuX mirrors this, a looming structure of control over the colonies, but with warring internal factions vying for domination. Not to mention the Federation, down but not out, still looming on Earth. The mere presence of these power players and the shadow of the prior war of unprecedented scale creates a constant state of alienation and dread. Tsurumaki knows today's youth don't remember the Cold War, but they do know what it's like to live with the threat of war without the spectacle of one. Because that's the post-9/11 condition. Low-level, omnipresent conflict with no endgame. The normalization of constant death via the machine of capital and greed, just like GQuuuuuuX's uneasy ceasefire and desperate economic disparities. Izuma Colony, the Side 6 orbital colony our new story takes place in, isn't just a Japanese-inspired habitat, it's a metaphor for modern alienation. Tsurumaki describes it like this. Well, that's the influence of what I felt like when I was young. I grew up in the middle of the rice fields in Niigata, and even though the horizon stretched out in all directions, it still somehow felt narrow. Of course, if I walked all the way past the mountain, I'd eventually reach Tokyo, but that wasn't actually feasible, was it? I felt like I was trapped inside my small, familiar garden, and I wondered, am I going to spend my whole life in this place? I depicted that fear in Fooly Cooly, as well as in this work. It's not like Machu thinks that a space colony is too narrow, I hate it, but she feels like the world has to be much more vast, more free. It's a mirror of our own post-pandemic, post-industrial claustrophobia. Everyone is lonely all the time. We're connected by machines in our pockets, which simultaneously alienate us from each other and separate us from each other's humanity. When Machu, our new protagonist, questions the artificial gravity of her home, she's really asking what even is real. Is her world real? Are Newtypes real? Is this future real? There's a sense of disassociation and unreality that Tsurumaki is channeling here, one that he felt in his youth, and one that he thinks the youth of today are burdened with. The overwhelming fear and anxiety for the future of our world, and not knowing whether or not there even will be a future. It's a stunning link: political unreality and personal anxiety. And at the heart of GQuuuuuuX is this exact recognition that systems like capitalism or empire manufacture reality itself and rob all of us human beings of our own feelings of agency. Tsurumaki isn't just rehashing the One-Year War, he's invoking the feelings of Cold War paranoia and claustrophobia, the sense that war isn't just something that happens over there, but that it's a constant, invisible pressure. The Azuma colony isn't a battlefield, well, yet anyways, but it's not free. A society technically at peace, but living under the shadow of Zeon's victory, just like how Japan under US occupation was both post-war and perpetually on the brink of annihilation at the same time. GQuuuuuuX asks what if Zeon won, but more importantly, it asks how did they win? Tsurumaki's answer isn't just better tactics or mass-produced big zombs. It's about the Gundam itself, the superweapon falling into the hands of Char. This time, instead of Amuro piloting the Gundam, it's Zeon pilot Char Aznable, the charismatic and mysterious masked rival of Amuro. Instead of a Federation victory, Zeon gains the upper hand. What changes this course of history? Primarily the Gundam, the mythic machine whose pilot determines the world's future. The existence of the Gundam itself has to be the trigger for the turning point in history. That's when I came up with the idea of, what if the pilot of the Gundam was Char instead? The Federation's victory in the original Gundam series was never clean. It was built on the backs of child soldiers, war crimes, and Zeon's original Newtype ideology being proven accurate. Now, in this timeline, Zeon's victory forces us to confront the reality that no hegemon is benevolent. Tsurumaki's Cold War allegory isn't just anxious nostalgia, it's a diagnosis. The War on Terror normalized perpetual war, just like the Cold War did. And the Cold War might be gone, but the anxiety remains, now with more privatized war crimes. Likewise, in GQuuuuuuX, the colony our characters live in isn't free because nowhere is free under Zeon's hegemony and occupation. Machu's longing for a vaster world mirrors today's youth who feel trapped between climate collapse, late-stage capitalism, and the genocidal airstrikes they scroll past on social media. Machu isn't your typical Gundam protagonist. She's not a soldier or a rebel, at least at first. She's a fairly privileged young girl living in Side 6, a colony with a dark underbelly of discrimination against refugees and undocumented immigrants displaced by war. But what sets her apart from her bourgeoisie contemporaries is her complete lack of prejudice. According to GQuuuuuuX's principal writer, Yoji Enokido, it might seem like she's a bit reckless and eccentric, but in my interpretation, the most unique trait of Machu's personality is that she doesn't have prejudices. Side 6 is basically a normal, everyday world, somewhat resembling present-day Japan, but there's an area inside the colony where immigrants, both legal and illegal, and refugees live, people who are relatively discriminated against within the colony. Even in a society with such a dark side, Machu doesn't hold any prejudice towards the refugees and the illegal immigrants there. Whether that's because she fundamentally lacks the concept of prejudice, or because she simply doesn't want to acknowledge it, even I am not totally sure. If a normal girl were to come in contact with a smuggler of an illegal installer key like Neon, she'd probably report her to the police immediately. But not Machu. She'd just go and ask for compensation for her broken smartphone or something. This is to say, Machu basically considers Neon to be her equal. In this sense, inside that Side 6, she's certainly a peculiar girl. Machu doesn't see Neon, our second main character, as a criminal or an outsider. She sees her as an equal. And when the military police brutalize Neon and destroy refugee settlements, calling them illegal anyways, Machu's anger isn't just personal. It can't be. She doesn't even know most of these people impacted yet. Instead, it's a rejection of the societal and state dehumanization of marginalized people in her society. She is a believer in radical equity. Her decision to pilot the Gundam isn't just about rebellion or a desire for adventure, it's a direct response to fascist state violence against undocumented migrants happening right before her very eyes. Considering our world today, it doesn't get any more politically explicit than that. And as Anakido notes, it mirrors Amuro's rage in the original Mobile Suit Gundam when he witnesses innocent civilians being bombed by Zeon. Machu's defiance is a class-conscious act. She refuses to accept the colony's hierarchy, even if she fully doesn't confront her own place in it. Neon, our refugee smuggler, on the other hand, embodies the survival tactics of the oppressed. Anakido admits she was hard to write, somewhat like a refugee, then more like a smuggler, because her existence defies easy categorization. She's not a noble revolutionary, she's someone forced into the shadows by a system that criminalizes her very existence. According to Anakido, when she gets attacked by immigration police, Neon believes that it's only natural that they're being violent against someone like her. Neon has internalized her own oppression, a common trauma for marginalized people under capitalism, fascism, colonialization, and imperialism. The state's violence is so routine that she expects it. Machu's outrage at this acceptance is a critique on how systems of power normalize brutality, but it's also a call to action for the viewer to normalize resistance against such brutality. And Anakido promises GQuuuuuuX will be filled with high-tension developments like a roller coaster, but this isn't just spectacle, it's a warning. Revolution is messy, chaotic, it demands everything from those who fight. Machu, Neon, and Shuji have to take it to the limit, as Anakido says, because the system leaves them no choice. GQuuuuuuX isn't just fiction, it's a mirror. From anti-refugee police brutality to Cold War dread, it reflects our world's injustices. And like all great Gundam stories, it asks, what are you, dear viewer, willing to fight for? By blurring the lines between victory and loss, power and peace, GQuuuuuuX teaches us a final lesson. Clarity is a luxury of the powerful. Zeon didn't lose the one-year war in this story, but it did fracture and emulate the system it claimed it would overthrow. The United States of America didn't win the Cold War. Instead, it privatized it. It turned war into markets, proxy states, cultural hegemony. And yet, GQuuuuuuX finds hope in disillusioned youth. Machu, Shuji, Neon, characters living after the war but haunted by its ghosts, they embody a generation living in the wreckage of ideologies they never chose, and they ask, what now? In GQuuuuuuX, the Gundam is no longer just a superweapon. It's a symbol where history twists and contorts and futures fork. Director Tsuramaki sought to create an alternative historical fiction, and screenwriter Anakido fleshed out the work with a focus on revolutionary equity and human rights. In doing so, they built a bridge between the Cold War's end and our imperial now. A world where war never ended, it just got quieter. A world where freedom never arrived, it just became commodified. Tsuramaki's genius is in making GQuuuuuuX feel like a memory of the Cold War while exposing the present anxieties of our real world today. The Federation and Zeon aren't just space fascists, they're the same system in different fonts. And in a world where the United States, Israel, Canada, and the European powers commit genocide in Gaza while selling twisted ideologies and selfish systems of their own, the real alternative history should be us imagining a future without colonization in the first place. Is that kind of a future even possible? In Gundam, Newtypes are human beings who have evolved to better understand one another. They represent a possible escape from the cycle of war and oppression. Psychic empaths. Newtypes are the stand-in for revolutionary action and possibility, inspired by the 60s-era leftist and anti-war movements opposing US empire around the globe, as well as in Japan. They embody the hope for a future where humanity moves beyond nationalism, capitalism, and violence. But Newtypes also represent the danger of that hope and possibility being weaponized against humanity. In Gundam, Newtypes are regularly used as weapons by those in power, and the term loses its transcendental context and instead becomes a synonym for ace pilot in a combat situation. This tension reflects the leftist critique of power structures, emphasizing that true liberation requires more than just a change at the individual level. It demands systemic rupture. Despite its bleak portrayal of war and oppression, Mobile Suit Gundam as a franchise isn't without hope. Newtypes like Amuro, Char, Camille, Machu, Neon, and Shuji represent the possibility of change, fighting not just for victory, but for a better future. The series suggests that true progress requires radical empathy, solidarity, and a commitment to dismantling oppressive systems. This message aligns with leftist ideals, which emphasize collective action and the belief that a more just and equitable world is possible. Mobile Suit Gundam challenges us to imagine that world and to fight for it. Decades after its debut, Gundam remains relevant because its themes are timeless. War, class struggle, and the misuse of revolutionary ideals are not just sci-fi concepts, they are the realities of our world. Because Gundam is not just about giant robots, it's about questioning the systems that govern our lives. And in that sense, Gundam is not just a story, it's a warning, it's a call to action, one that I heeded at a very young age. In the end, Gundam reminds us that the fight for justice is never easy, but it's always worth it. So, yeah, thanks for watching my first video on Mobile Suit Gundam. Definitely check out the new series GQuuuuuuX. As you can probably tell, Gundam means an incredible amount to me. I hope to make more videos like this in the future, so please consider subscribing and comment what you think about the video. So thanks again, and until next time. Oh, and really quickly, big thanks to SHINSEIKI blog for doing these translations. I'll link to their Coffee link and their blog where you can read the full interviews with both Tsurumaki and Akido. So, yeah. Thanks a lot. See you next time. 横たわる